Hi everyone, welcome to AGSI's Academy of Part 2 of John Locke of UPSC PCS 2022 under Western Political Thought or WPT or PSIR of Paul Science International Lessons. Useful for UGC, NET, JRF, SET, SLET and other university and college exams. This video, dear friends, is a second part of the series of John Locke, which we had covered in the first part, that was initial phase of that, of about John Locke and different initial political philosophies. Basically, this video has been made with a purpose to the clarity of thoughts and understanding of the philosophy of John Locke. This is in detail all this series region students aspirants first they want to understand the concept of the philosophy. Here the logic behind of the clarity is, unless my friends, my experienced students understand, it will be difficult for them to check out important points. So if they understand whole concepts, then any question from any sources, if are being asked, they will be able to handle, and you all of you will be able to handle. That's the logic behind this. So this is very elaborate political philosophy, and as I said, quite useful for the aspirants of civil services, particularly for IS men who are going to write this man's of 2022. At the same time, this is also very useful for NET JRF set SLET of 2021, which, as it is being talked about, the exams are likely, the admit cards are likely to be issued for this NET JRF exams. Entirely depends on the schedules as and when it comes. And also very useful for college and university going students who are opting Western political thought or political science or BA program or even political science honors or even at master level. So in all these cases, this video is tremendously useful, which could play a decisive role for their understandings. And now in this second part of the video, I would like to discuss some important quotations of John Locke, and after that we'll discuss about theory of value, property, significance, all what John Locke talked about that, which is very significant part in day-to-day life. So let's have some important quotations of John Locke. To begin with, it says, let me tell you one thing, dear students, dear friends, that UPSC or an exam might give you the quotation and they can ask you explain to what is referred to with the help of suitable examples. So let us see what the first quotation here in this video I'm talking about is: all mankind being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. What does it mean? What is referred to? It simply means those persons who are equal in the state of nature, those persons who are equal or citizens and independent from each other, then there is no reason why they need to involve in conflict with other human beings or the fellow citizens. There is no reason why they need to harm another, not only in a short, rather for the whole life. from any perspective could be liberty, health, life, or different positions of belongingness. This talks about this a clarity of independent livelihoods and freedom for the person in that sense. So that is very, very significant. It's talking about how best that could be useful from that perspective. And dear friends, in this sense, it is also important. So, dear friends, it talks about this particular quotation. If human beings are free, if they're free in all senses without involving into conflicts with others, then definitely there is no reason they can fight each other, which was not the case with the case of Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes, as we had seen in part 1 of the video of Thomas Hobbes under WPT IS 2022 under the banner of AGS IS Academy. Dear friends, but as we know about like conditions and notions of John Locke, which lasted like 1632 to 1704, was much in a better liberal position when he talked about political philosophy and prevailing situations of that time. He was not as conservative as in thought processes might be decidedly at that point of time the situation could have been slightly better, whatever the reason. But this quotation is definitely something important that sends a strong message to the readers about this, and then answers in the exams could be written accordingly. Dear friends, this video will be slightly longer and request to have patience and view till the last so that you can have fair enough ideas in details and will strengthen your concepts and clarity about John Locke. Dear friends, let's have the next quotation. What John Locke talks about is government has no other end but the preservation of property. So, what he says, he is very particular about the governmental propositions, and he refers to a condition where the government only needs to be particular about the preservation of the property of the citizens rather than involving in other things which could cause a tremendous harm in any capacity against the citizens of that state or society. This is what John Locke appears to be saying. This quotation can also be given in the exams and can be asked to explain with suitable examples, and it refers to whom? Dear friends, because we know property is an issue that always becomes very dear in the society for each one of us. Since the time immemorial, the talk, value, and understanding of property is much bigger than what anybody can think of. Dear friends, John Locke, in this sense, talks about the government should be under the social contract, be obliged and be willing to cooperate with the citizen only in the areas which are essential to defend what the understanding appears to be. So, according to this statement, you need to throw light so that you can find the suitable answer and explain with the help of any relevant examples of John Locke of that time vis-a-vis the contemporary global society of political discourse right across the world. Let's think for a while. Even today, every one of us knows very well that the value of property is much more than human beings, it seems in some cases. It appears in some cases that property is more important than human beings, while the reverse is true. Human being is human being. Nothing can be compared with human beings and their values. Human beings' values are always high, but for those who believe in temporal things, in that sense, it can be talked about and a point of debate. Friends, the next quotation of John Locke, what he talks about is, what worries you masters you. His quotation is, what worries you masters you. What does it mean? It talks about a situation, as per the understanding, something which is very, very important for any human being, essentially that creates worrisome, definitely remains in the psyche of the human being. And understandably, that perception persists in the mindset and creates a kind of worriness which reminds time and again to the same person about that fear psychosis or the fearfulness in one or other capacities. So these two can also be explained with the help of examples either of the epoch of John Locke or no. Conditionally, there should be relevance of this. Dear friends, another quotation of John Locke could be found in this sense, like, and the quotation is, the reason why man enter into society is the preservation of their property. What we are seeing again? We are seeing again here also. John Locke talks, why at all any human being of that state of nature tried to enter into the social contract with the government? Why at all it was needed to do so? Why at all it was the prerequisite condition for any humanity to surrender his or her rights to the second party in the first place? Dear friends, it's very essential to understand. This is not very ordinary thing like anybody can surrender the entire rights to somebody for which there is no surety what will happen and how the previous party will be governed or will be taken care of. It's all based on trust. If the trust is breached, if the trust is broken, then who will abide this? Who will make the trust being commanded and implemented? That's a big question, dear friends. And this is very important quotation. Okay, the reason why man enter into society, society here refers to kind of social contract or kind of commonwealth which Thomas Hobbes talked about, as per the understanding. Dear friends, any other things could have been taken care of by the humanity, by the person, by the citizen, or by the demography of that person, of that state of nature. In simple words, human beings could have taken care of anything else minus property. Since property is dear to everybody and needs to be protected, so that's only possible from Thomas Hobbes, from John Locke's point of view, that needs a kind of trust, entity, ruler, governance, who could be in a position to defend and protect the property of human beings of that state of nature. Dear friends, We'll see later in the discussion about John Locke's theory of property, how significant that is in the society, and then he has written extensively and intensively over that issue, vis-a-vis society, which society treats how and in what capacities. And the same quotation could be explained much more with suitable examples further. Dear friends, let's have the next quotation of John Locke, and that is about again, every man has a property in his own person. I repeat, every man has a property in his own person, and this nobody has a right to but himself. Dear friends, this quotation is very, very important. Every man, according to it, has a property. If we try to decipher various components of this line, we'll get the meaning of it in a way. It says every man automatically turns out to be in the form of a property. And then nobody can claim the property of somebody whose property is or whose property belongs to that entity, person, or to any gender. It's only that person who carries the value of and who has earned the money, earned the property by virtue of his or her own capacity or labor really deserves to have the right of that property. It indicates this, it sends this quotation sends a strong message to the readers and important from exam's point of view and can be explained of that era when John Locke talks about also in today's globalized world can be derived in a sense that could be useful for the explanations of this quotation. Dear friends, going further, the next quotation, what John Locke talks about is, and he says, all wealth is the product of labor. He says, all wealth is the product of labor. What does it mean? It simply means any human being who has accumulated, who has legitimate, genuine property, has every right to work on that, has every right to see that property is understood, taken care of, and can be protected and cannot be harmed by somebody who wants to harm this. Because all wealth is the product of labor essentially refers to a position where the property is not free. The property neither comes free nor is the testimony of somebody's free offer, but the consistent and hard work of a human being who has tried to find out and got property accumulated. It could be either from the perspective of his own earnings or could be hereditary, but whatever reason could be, the wealth from whatever sources is the manifestation of the labor, the work behind that. This is what like John Locke tries to convince, tries to send a message about that. Dear friends, in the questions, it can be simply given in the form of a quotation. They can ask you, all wealth is the product of labor. Please justify this statement by explaining with suitable examples. Then you will have to you will have to refer this quotation to the thinker, and then you need to elaborate its meanings, its understandings, and then explanations, examples, advantages, disadvantages, analysis, and conclusion. Accordingly, you have to conclude. Dear friends, let's have the next quotation of John Locke, and that's about fortitude is the guard and support of the other virtues. In the society, as we know, virtues' role are very, very significant, and that's very, very essential in a way which can no way be neglected for any reason, whatever the case could be in the contemporary society or anywhere. And this is what, like John Locke talks about, the virtues are so important that need to be, or that can be seen from different perspectives. And in that sense, fortitude is the guard and support of other virtues. Dear friends, this is not that important quotation, so we are not going to discuss much more about this. Let's have the next quotation, and that's of John Locke about, like, the only fence against the world is a true knowledge of it. What, like, in this sense of this particular quotation, John Locke talks about is, in the society, in the world of that time of John Locke. And what was the era of that? 1632 to 1704 was the era of John Locke, who talked about, and from there of his writings, the quotation has been taken out. What it says, let's repeat, let's find again, let's try to understand again. The only fence against the world. If the what it says, if the world is not conducive for your growth and development, if the world is not really desirable for from those perspective who sees the world not as a favorable entity but the other way around, then what's the solution? How that terrible barriers can be thwarted and can be taken care of, like, seems to be the reflection of this particular quote taken from John Locke. Dear friends, the same quotation further gives the solution of the previous part of this. It talks about, yes, it could be true, the world could be very good, the world could be very nice, but depends on the understanding, it could be the other way around also. Then in that case, what should be done? Dear friends, then it gives the answer also in the same quotation. It says, all answers of this particular or miseries of the world against humanity or anybody which he or she or anything else sees or finds can be found in the form of understanding. Understand the world, understand the problem, understand the entire anatomy of what is being seen or comes to you in any capacity. If you know that very well, if you have the knowledge what to handle and how to handle and what to leave and not to leave, definitely in that sense, those miseries, those problems will be automatically taken care of. Dear friends, what we're discussing right now in this video of this part 2 under AGS IS Academy banner, which is the premier platform for students, for aspirants, for anybody to understand the entire political science and international relations for colleges, for universities, for any top class competitive exams or UPSC or civil services, anywhere, it's quite useful. Dear friends, let's continue the next quotation and let us try to understand his next quotation that's so important, and that talks about is new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without the other reason but because they are not common. John Locke. Let us repeat and try to understand. It says, new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason but because they are not common. What it refers to? If the same quotation, dear friends, comes in the exams and you are being asked to, and if this comes in the exams, then what will it refer to from your perspective? Let us try to understand this. It says, rather, John Locke says in this quotation, new opinions are always suspected. Yes, this is very much true across the world. It is said like when something comes new anywhere, at any level, on any platform, it's always being questioned about the veracity of the new thoughts, new processes, new ideas, or anything, even new objects. What does it mean? It simply means something which has come to the environment which is not part of it, and it was not actually the part of what is going on and how things are going on, like it was not earlier what is currently could be the part of this. Then in that sense, something new which comes in the environment or related components not necessarily accept that in toto. And this is where the new ideas, thoughts, and process are being suspected as to how, what is the actually factual descriptions, veracity, or genuineness of it, people feel naturally, and that's quite natural. So John Locke talks about these new ideas or any sort of whenever creep over, they are being usually opposed. They are not being supported. And even for that, there could be no reason for opposing or supporting. The problem is this happens. Why this happens? He says this could be purely because it may not as clear as seems to be for the recipients at the very outset. And when they don't understand first new ideas, simply they try to oppose it. They try not to find, they try not to first go into the deep of the new ideas, thoughts, process, or anything. Rather, what comes to their mind is this could be something unacceptable and not desirable for them. This is where, with the common regions, they don't become common, they don't align directly with the common ideas prevailing at that point of time in the society. They are generally hesitant and reluctant to accept those new ideas. Dear friends, this was the view of this quotation of John Locke, what he tried to underline. Then we have his next quotation is, we are like chameleons. We take our hue and the color of our moral character. from those who are around us. John Locke. This is the next quotation what like John Locke talks about taken from his write-ups. Dear friends, it's a very very significant quotation of John Locke, and he talks about actually the human beings not only of that society or that period of time, anywhere in the world, the nature, the perceptions, the thought actually are something which happen to be the part of the class, the part of those cultures which are prevailing at that point of time. Dear friends, and it says, and John Locke tries to talk about like we take our hues and the color even of our moral character who are around us. It's quite clear like it is said also like the company where you live and then you behave as what your company talks behaves accordingly, automatically that reflection comes to you or comes to us. So we are the product of the environment where we live. That's quite natural. And this is what actually John Locke tries to paint the picture in his quotation when he talks about, I repeat, we are like chameleons. What are the features of chameleons? The features are they are able to change the colors of their anatomy, of their of their physical structure. They are able to suit their color as per the requirements of the environment wherever that chameleon is found. Here, human beings have been compared with that. For the reason, it's very essential as in the society it takes place, it happens. So naturally, he has tried to talk like this. Dear friends, then we have, in this sense, the question can also be asked how the question can be framed. That's also very, very essential to understand this. In this sense, the questions can be framed like they can ask like human beings are basically the product of the environment where they reside. Justify your answer with the help of suitable examples or logically. It can be of 15 marks question. It can be of 20 marks question for UPSC, PCS exams. Those who are likely to go for the exams of IAS men's or PCS men's, or even for those who are college and university students. Yes, dear friends, it's really essential of this question and quotation. The examiner tries to check basically what is the understanding level of that and how a particular candidate or aspirant will be able to appreciate the question and can give the answer correspondingly. Those aspirants will be able to answer who really have deep understanding or understand the very different components of this quotation and can use for writing purposes in the best practically possible way. Dear friends, let's have the next quotation of John Locke. What the quotation talks about is being all equal and independent. No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. I repeat what it says, being all equal and independent. No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. We have already done it, we have already covered it, so no need to go into details about this. And next quotation is, education begins the gentleman. Education begins the gentleman, but reading, good company, and reflection must finish him. Basically, in this quotation, John Locke tries to paint or tries to underline about the significance of education and connectivity of it with the gentleman or any human being which could have really having reflections in his or her personality when the person in question is being educated. Dear friends, and in addition to that, reading and good company definitely have a big reflection on any human being who is connected with the education or getting educations. So, accordingly, this is again important and significant from that perspective how an education can really play a significant role for those who are educated or likely to be educated. And then the reflection of reading and good company, how much could be reflecting on the personality. Dear friends, it's a very simple quotation which can be handled by any aspirants. Let's have the next quotation, and that's very, very important and much relevant right across the globe, even today, corresponding to the views of John Locke. What he talked about this quotation in his own era, but finds reflection even in today's world politics. Dear friends, and the quotation of John Locke, what he has talked about in his write up is, now we can say that revolt is the right of the people. I repeat, he says, revolt is the right of the people. What is it referred to? This is very, very important quotation of John Locke. When he talks about this, we know in any society, in any state, anywhere in the world of that time of John Locke, the situation was really not genuinely very conducive. The situation was somewhat difficult and different. You know what happens? Invention always takes place when there is need of necessity, and we know necessity is the mother of invention. And any top profile and top product comes out in the picture only when something goes totally abnormal or something which is not normal. We can find the same case of the era of John Locke, where he could have seen the situations around or far beyond not finding in tandem with the ethos of the public or the social contract which was there to defend the spirit of the public from all accounts. He had reservations about like when the public, when the commonwealth or the social contract or even the man of the state, if at all, will be in jeopardy or will be at stake of certain features which are essential to defend the human being. In that case, and if the human being's lives and everything which are essential for day-to-day activities, if could be in danger, then John Locke suggests at that point of time that that time will be a high time for each one of the state of the nature of that country to raise and move against the regime if that regime is really not fulfilling desires and conditions of the public which are meant for, under the banner of what we can say commonwealth or what we can say of that time or the social contract which is so essential, and that social contract which led to the formation of the civil society. And civil society is again very, very significant and important topic of John Locke, dear friends. So like it's very important from that point of view, from exams point of view of university or like competitive exams, to basically shed light on this particular quotation which is so important. This quotation can be useful. This quotation can be even interpreted in thousand ways for ways and means to find if the regime of that era where the subject is living is justifiable or not. Dear friends, this was a significant quotation of John Locke which he had discussed, which he had talked about, and essentially it was very important. Dear friends, so in this connection, when you talk about like about the regime, about the perceptions prevailing at that point of time, essentially that was calling for an environment which should be conducive for the public. This is what actually under this quotation of John Locke he tries to convey to those who want to really learn, who want to really see and find. At that point of time, what he saw, he explained in his write-ups and tried to convey to the rest of the society as to how things can be done if the regime is not conducive from their perspective, then they have every right to go the other way around. Dear friend, let's have the next quotation of John Locke, and that's about there is frequently more to be learned from the unexpected questions of a child than the discourses of man. I repeat, there is frequently more to be learned from the unexpected questions of a child than the discourses of man, was said by John Locke. What this particular quotation tries to paint, tries to talk about is it is said the behavior, the understanding, and the learning process of a child is very, very significant. And the behavior of a child talks about always remains in the process of asking questions, because the very beginning of the child when comes into the life, the child asks a variety of questions, and that happen to be something very innovative or new for the child. But then in asking so many innovative questions, people can learn a lot of things from there, then can learn from the adults or of their time. So essentially, it's very important from John Locke's point of view about this quotation, and so really sends a lesson for those who can understand okay, how important this quotation could be. Dear friends, let's have the next quotation, what like John Locke talked about, and then how this is important from or how what it sends to, what it signifies to. What it talks about, let's understand. So the quotation next is so that in effect religion which should most distinguish us, so that in effect religion which should most distinguish us from beasts and ought most peculiarly to elevate us as rational creatures ever brutes, is that wherein man often appear most irrational and more senseless than beasts themselves, by John Locke. Dear friends, this quotation is really a point of significance that tries to paint about the based about the creatures and a comparative analysis of human beings and the religion, how and in what capacity the religion can be understood, can be interpreted, and how actually creatures or beasts sometimes they are far better in different senses, sometimes happens to be rational than the human beings ought to be irrational in different perspectives, and which is what need not to be actually in our society. And he tries to paint at that time, then talking now or discussing about that religion based creatures or human beings. Dear friends, this could be given in the form of a quotation which already is before you, and to shed light to take out the main gist from this quotation, and then give the main ideas what it tries to say and convey. And the entire quotation could be in the form of a question from exam's point of view. So essentially the important factor in this quotation is you need to understand first what it tries to say, and this is what we try to explain this. Dear friends, the next quotation of John Locke is to prejudge other to prejudge other man's notions before we have looked into them is not to show their darkness, but to put our own eyes. Friends, I repeat this. To prejudge other man's notion before we have looked into them is not to show their darkness, but to put out our own eyes, is very important quotation. What John Locke talks about in this quotation is, let's interpret this as a part of UPSC question or PCS or college university questions. If we try to see, if we try to talk to somebody or try to know, our first impression about somebody happens to be as if we are far superior over others, we are far better and in better position over others. In many cases we find the reflection and think and perceive that the others are prejudged, and a kind of prejudices prevail that actually are uncalled for from any perspective. Prejudging somebody without knowing the fact actually what it is something which no human being, which no rational human beings can really talk about, can really underline, and that is not something called for. Dear friends, as you know, today in this video of part 2 of John Locke under the banner of AGS IS Academy, we are thoroughly discussing in a series in the continuation of part 1 under the same different pages. We are now on the stage of different quotations of John Locke. It itself is slightly big, but I have tried to pick those only which are important out of many quotations. The purpose behind this is to shed light on as many as possible so that that can be useful from any point of view, which can be useful and relevant from your perspective of exams. As examiners can pick up any important quotations of John Locke, one thing is to be remembered, examiners also try to set the questions, try to give the quotation which could be important and significant. It's not that any quotation can be picked up. Generally they try to pick and set in the question, and that quotation is essentially something which is really useful or could be having major impact, and then only given in the question paper. So what John Locke tries to paint in this quotation is, at that point of time, and as human nature, what is human nature is, human nature automatically, as you know, remains self-centered in most of the cases as per many thinkers. And also human beings nature are being painted in a way which are supposed to be or part of greedy nature, self-centered, and craving for getting more and more temporal things. And definitely that's part of human nature, what, as I said, many thinkers talked about and they had discussed already. So John Locke in this connection paints a picture about like the state of nature in that, and in the state of nature, humanity basically is somewhat forgotten, left behind, but the temporal things overshadow about others' behavior pattern without even knowing and looking into the very facts of others. Dear friends, it's very essential in a way that nobody should be prejudged based on the appearance or from hearing about somebody, unless we know, unless we have the ideas, unless we have some solid evidence about that person or entity. We should not be prejudgmental. How can we judge somebody without knowing into details about that person or humanity? Any rational person at least cannot do so or is not supposed to do so. Is the reflection of John Locke, what he tries to paint in this connection, is essentially important. Dear friend, so he says this is not the problem of somebody who is like right or wrong, but the problem of that body who is having notions about somebody without judging and without looking into the facts of that person, gives the judgment, and then that body who is giving the judgment is not basically giving judgment of that body, but himself or herself is painting in the darker side of his or her personality. Dear friends, if we see really into deeper picture of even today in our society of the world, across the humanity, in any country, the very nature of the human is what? They always paint first of their egos on the top, and then values of others are estimated and lowered. Others are always devalued as far as practically possible. This is what John Locke in this quotation tries to paint and prohibit, not to paint others, not to see others, not to try to find evils inside somebody, unless you know, unless you actually have the knowledge about somebody, about right or wrong, facts or falseness about that, you cannot, should not be judgmental. Dear friends, the bigger question is, does it really happen today? What like, or it used to happen that time only, or does it happen today itself? And we can draw parallel of that time and then times of today. So this is what like we need to explain, we need to add in the question as a part of answer when we find this kind of quotation right now about what John Locke talks about prejudging others' notions. Dear friends, the next quotation we can talk about, and that's about all wealth is the product of labor. This is something is very important from exams point of view, and then many times this particular kind of quotation finds reflections in different exams at various levels. While like John Locke talks about like all wealth is the product of labor, essentially what comes to our mind, what really we try to find out how it extracts in our perceptions, in our psychology. When he talks about all wealth, he says let us try to explain it. According to John Locke, he says each one of us anywhere in the world, if we have wealth, if we have, you can say, temporal products, and that wealth, how do you think that wealth could have come and been accumulated? Do you think the wealth of anybody could have come automatically? Could be, yes, we are knowing, could be at least two reasons for the accumulation of wealth. One could be through hereditary or through parental means. Other could be the personal or on his own or somebody's own earning capacity, or could have earned on his or on her basis. Precisely on that account, John Locke talks about all wealth, whatever could be the form of the nature. Basically, all wealth is the product of labor, what the person, what the man in the state of nature or beyond under the social contract talks about could have been. It could have been the reflection of labor. Without labor, the wealth cannot be procured. He does not say the wealth was procured today by somebody or was procured by the parental means. What he says all about is wealth in any form and capacity essentially is the reflection of labor, and the labor could be involved in whatever modes, but the labor is there and connected with the wealth accumulation. Dear friends, he is not questioning about the wealth, how wealth is there, the nature of wealth. What he is questioning is, what is talking about is, what is giving theory understanding is, labor cannot be separated from the accumulation of wealth. If wealth is there, it essentially talks about like labor is involved there. And definitely you all know, in due course of time, when you come across about the concept and political philosophy of Karl Marx, he also tremendously, he talks about like labor. Also labor is one of the factors. When he talks about like proletariat, bourgeois and capitalism, you all see in his concept the role of labor is very very significant. Here in this sense, John Locke also, basically it's something which Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan or otherwise did not talk directly about the product of labor and the wealth, how these both the two factors are connected, and how both these two cannot be really separated from each other and play decisive role so far the connection of wealth and labor is concerned in any capacity. So John Locke, if he talks about like the connectivity of the labor product with like wealth, that plays very important role. Dear friends, what we are discussing today now is various quotations taken out from the mega works or major works of John Locke under AGS IS Academy for UPSC PCS of WPT of PSIR for UGC NET JRF set Slet or any other exams. Dear friends, the quotation which we discussed, many of them were so important, and generally these quotations are supposed to be very very major work, major reflections of the write-ups of John Locke. So essentially, it is very significant. Dear friends, let's conclude of today's quotations, what we have discussed, and why these quotations are important from exam's point of view, from all which we mentioned of those point of view, and even otherwise from apart from those exams, practically also these quotations people should know, so that these quotations can be used and applied and experimented in each one of us day to day's life, because that's very very essential to understand, and also not only to understand, also how best it can be applied for our practical realities of life, which demands a greater understanding, and the application of it is so important, as we can understand. So let us conclude. To conclude, what you all have to look into is, when the topic of John Locke comes, or you try to understand this, not only his political philosophy is significant to understand and to be understood, also essential is various quotations of his write-ups should be taken into considerations, so that if at all can be asked in exams, you will be able to appreciate and explain in a way what actually the examiner is looking for, and looking into your answer, and that answer should justify from the perspective of exams point of view whatever you want to write in the exams. Dear friends, do share, like, and subscribe if it's informative for you all, and thanks for watching this video.